When we start to explore this perception, the differences, what we're actually doing is we're exploring and pushing the boundaries on what is possible to experience. If you'd been talking to me back then when that sort of experience was happening, those wow experiences were happening, I would have been less grounded. There was quite often times when I was completely off with the fairies. And that in itself can be a bit dodgy, a bit dangerous, but you have to integrate. So the wow experiences are not the target. They are a part of the process, part of the path. And the experience that you then have, which is integrating those two aspects of self, reveals the full picture, and you lived that full picture as best you can, because that's when you start to actually experience and allow the conscious cosmos to be present with you.
Welcome to the Enchanted Earth Podcast, where you will hear stories of nature with the power to transform our lives. These sacred stories are begging to be shared now. So listen in as my guest today shares one of their own. So welcome today for my conversation with Tim Walter. He's a well-respected dowser, house healer, and I'm very grateful to call him a friend. His newest book just came out, What Next?, which partly recounts his journey into house healing and the nature of our spiritual connection with the sacred. In this talk, he shares what it means to be a fully conscious human, how we can all step onto this path of spiritual development, the pitfalls and signs to be aware of while on this path, and his amazing relationship with his guide in the spiritual realm, Merlin. So please listen in for this treat with Tim. So welcome, Tim.
Thank you for having me.
I am excited to have you back. And, it's just perfect timing because you just came out with your book, What Now? And I read through it and was really loving the different aspects of the book where you talk about consciousness and earth energy work, which we're going to get into a little bit deeper today. But I also love the fact that you share your journey from TV and film production to becoming a house healer. And I just love reading these stories because, wow, like a world apart, shall I say. And I know that as well because that's my journey from marketing to doing what I do today. So I just really love to see that process. And I think a lot of people will benefit from seeing that because I think a lot of people think people like you and I have been doing this since birth, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think more and more, people are questioning what it is that they are doing and what they're asking of life and what they want from life. So I think that, as you say, the more people talk about the fact that you can make these big transitions, if you really want to at a certain stage in life. I mean, certainly for me and my wife, it was a question of doing it at a time when our two sons had reached the age where they were kind of already spreading their wings and off they were going. Bless them. So it wasn't difficult. It wasn't difficult, like in that sense, to sort of stick with the family ties, as it were, or shift them off as part of our change. But yeah, I think more and more people are really looking at themselves and evaluating what it is they want from life.
What an amazing time that we're in right now. I really do think. So I would love for you to share one of your stories of that journey, whatever one kind of pops up. But first, we're going to be talking a lot about, we're going to be talking about dowsing today. I'm going to pull out a few threads from your book that really resonated with me, and we'll talk about that. But first, I'd just like you to give our listeners a very simple definition of what dowsing is, because I think a lot of people are very confused or maybe have no idea what it is.
Yeah, it's true. I often forget that dowsing is not. Sorry, I'm just reaching over here to actually get a dowsing rod. It's not a common thing. People are not used to sort of experiencing it or coming across it. So most people, if they've heard of dowsing at all, They have heard of it because it's a way of finding water. That's the classic thing. The idea, the picture of an old bloke walking across a field with a bent bit of stick or a bent bit of rod, and it shows them where the water underground might be. So at one point, dowsing was defined in the English dictionary as the art of finding hidden things. And that is really fundamentally what it is. So dowsing, it's a way of using your intuition through subconscious processes to affect, with tiny, tiny muscular movements, it will affect a rod or a pendulum or whatever device perhaps the dowser is holding. There's something called a bobber, which is very popular as well at the moment. So it's a subconscious process. It's using your intuition, but you can really ask it anything at all and get some kind of response. And the idea is that we're actually asking our subconscious, or on a spiritual level, we're asking the universe or our higher selves, asking questions of that information field in order to get a response that we can't get through our five senses. So hopefully that makes sense. So you usually either use a rod or a pendulum.
Yes, and that was really lovely. And when I was reading your book, there was a line in it that was talking about Earth is a sentient being which communicates with us through Earth energy. And I was like, well, yeah. Can we just like pull that apart a little? I would love to hear more about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, how long have you got? Because it's an easy sentence, isn't it? It's quite a short sentence. Actually, I think to explain it might take a few minutes, but let's dive in and see where we go. So, I think to give some background for people, I learnt about Earth energy primarily from my mentor, who was a guy called Hamish Miller. Hamish Miller was responsible for, amongst other things, tracing the Michael and Mary Earth energy lines across the south of England. And he also wrote a book, co-wrote it with a guy called Paul Broadhurst. And the book is The Sun and the Serpent. Now, a lot of people first come across dowsing in The Sun and the Serpent. It's a tale of a remarkable journey of those two guys tracking that energy line across the south of England. Now, Earth energy is the mechanism that the Earth, that Gaia, Mother Earth, uses to communicate with us if we wish to be open to that communication. It actually is fundamental to our being on Earth, which we will probably come to shortly. But the thing is that this field of energy in which we live, which dowsers call Earth energy, can be regarded as the quantum field, which is the quantum field of infinite possibility. So it's the field of energy from which matter is made. Now, you have to bear in mind that absolutely everything in the universe is energy, which means it is just simply, at its most fundamental level, that is clearly, right? So everything at the most fundamental level is absolutely energy, which means it is just vibrating at a certain frequency. So when we, as an energy being, interact with the energy of the Earth, namely Earth energy, we are able to receive information from that field in the form of what are effectively sacred symbols. And this is a process that people can do in their own homes. And this is something that really gets people's imagination and is also quite shocking for people, because they think that, well, they've heard of ley lines, right? And ley lines are often mistakenly with the label that people use for Earth energy lines. But Earth energy is the really important thing here. So, and they think of Earth energy or ley lines as just being present through places like sacred sites. So like ancient Neolithic sacred sites, for example, or big churches or any of these things, right? Like Stonehenge or something like that. But that's not the case. The Earth energy is a field that is absolutely everywhere. We can pick up on lines or vortices because those are the most concentrated places, and that's what we happen to tune into as the focused field at that point in the context of our interaction with it. So what we're saying is, a dowser, and it's useful to use the dowsing as a tool because it's the easiest way to actually open this subtle aspect of the human being. So a dowser in your own home can ask the universe to be shown the most beneficial and powerful earth energy center, vortex, in the home. And then you can actually just meditate with it and start to ask it, in other words, Mother Earth, it questions. And certain questions will elicit certain symbolic responses from that earth energy center. But these symbols that we can find in this early process of dowsing with earth energy and with communicating with Mother Earth in this way are the fundamental sacred symbols that all spiritual beliefs throughout the globe have somewhere in their framework, somewhere in their library of symbolism. These basic symbols, there's about 4 or 5 of them, that will reappear time and time again throughout the globe. And it's because our relationship to the earth on this frequency that we are relating to it when we're dowsing is so fundamentally important.
Yes, yes. So yeah, we're getting a little deep here with the secret symbols, and it's just luscious. Can you just share with us how somebody is able to is it visualizing this symbol in an image that might come to them, or are they actually dowsing the shape?
You can actually douse it, and once you've found the power center, the Earth Energy Power Center, and I apologize for going deep. I do tend, as you probably remember, I do tend to go deep very quickly, and it does put some people off. So just keep me at a level that we can all kind of access this information. So once you found the power center, the one that you want to work with, which, as I just repeat, is the most positive and beneficial, powerful Earth Energy Center in the home. It's important that you add those words in when you're first looking for it, especially if you're a new dowser. Now, once you found it, you just take a step back from the center of it, and you ask, for example, there's a symbol that is like an infinity symbol, so it's a figure of 8. So you can just ask to be shown, can you show me, please, the first figure of 8? And you've got your rod, and you're going to, yes, okay, fine. And then you'll step towards the power center that you've just found. And as you get towards it, your rod will move, and that will be the edge of the figure of 8 that basically you're starting to interact with. And then you can follow it round. And in that following round process, you can, if you've got something like, little tea lights, little candles, they're ideal for just dropping on the ground as you go. And what you'll see is then you're tracing what it is that you're actually dowsing. So you can step back afterwards, look at it and see your figure of 8. And there it is. And you can do that with all of these sort of shapes, because the power center will fundamentally fit within the room. It'll fit within the space that you're working. Well, no matter how big or small your room is, that it'll be within that space. You might have to shift a few chairs as you go round, but it's going to be in a room, right?
And okay, so how can we use that to our benefit?
Excuse me, sipping tea. You'll have to just put up with the tea.
Well, you're British.
Exactly. It's afternoon tea. Now, how do we use it how do we use it? How do we benefit from this? I have to say, just to share a little bit with you, when I first decided that I was going to separate out from the film and video, the previous life that I was having as a film and video producer, right? I thought all I would have to do is to tell people about earth energy, and they'll be flooding to it. They'll see immediately what the benefit of this is. And I thought, that's all I need to do. Just write a couple of blogs and they'll be on it. Right. Yeah. What was I thinking? So the important thing about this is that what we're dealing with in earth energy, I used the phrase earlier on, the quantum field of infinite possibility. So it is a quantum energy. Now, don't let the word quantum freak your listeners, viewers. Don't let them freak out about that. But it is a quantum field. So it's subatomic. It's the energy from which everything is formed. Talk a bit more about that in a minute. Now, the thing is that we generally accept now, it's pretty well broadly accepted by virtually everybody, that we, to a certain extent, different people have a different idea of how much we get involved in creating our own reality, but it's pretty well accepted that we create our own experience of reality. And you can say, well, even psychologists say, yes, well, of course you do, because of the way, because your attitude elicits a certain response from somebody else, so therefore you're creating your own reality even by just your psychological attitude, blah, 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 right? Well, what we're doing when we're interacting with earth energy is literally manifesting. We're manifesting at a point where we're kind of going up the chain of events, right? If you see what I mean. So if we think that spirituality as a principle is based on communing with the ultimate creator, if we want to call it that, you can refer to that as the universe or whatever you like. But fundamentally, a spiritual approach to life is about communicating with that unseen field of energy that can assist our experience of life. That's why we pray, right? Now, when we access earth energy and we access these power centers and we start to open the conversation with Mother Earth, who is a part of the manifesting process, because we are earthlings, we are made of earth, we are made of the same atomic structure in terms of the elements and all of that stuff. I mean, we're slightly more, no, we're differently composed, clearly, but I was going to say we're slightly more intelligent, but that's not actually true. It's just a different scale of existence. So anyway, look, we are earthlings, and therefore we're representatives of Mother Earth effectively in our lives. And what we're doing is we're interacting at a higher frequency with the ability to manifest. So we're literally starting a conversation that means we can more effectively adjust the reality that we experience. It doesn't stop there, because once you work with this and start to understand more about what's going on, you actually realize that you can affect others' experience of reality as well. And that's what we call healing. If we're doing it for the benefit of others, we're introducing very high frequencies, which come not necessarily from the earth, but from upstairs, let's say. Then we're introducing a compassionate frequency that can adjust somebody else's reality. And that's the crux of it. So really, in answer to your question, the benefit of interacting with earth energy is that you are interacting with your own life in a different way. So you're adopting a different perspective. It's not about being in control. It's about understanding your position within life. And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it's just one way that we can be conscious of, well, conscious in our lives, right? It's just another tool.
Yeah. Yeah, it opens up the whole field of what is sometimes called intentional living, because we're being mindful about the attitude and the energy that we're interacting with. And that's the crux of it, because what we're doing when we're interacting with earth energy is we're interacting with what science refers to as subtle energy. And science doesn't like subtle energy because it hasn't got the equipment to actually interact with it and measure it and do something with it, categorize it. But it is fundamentally, I mean, I regard it as a quantum field, but it can also be regarded at a kind of a level closer to physicality as being an electromagnetic field or a geomagnetic field.
Absolutely. And I love this notion that earth energy isn't just a random flow of something unknown. It is a flow of information that maintains reality as we individually and collectively perceive it, which is essentially what you just said.
Yeah, no, but that's a great summary of it, because that is exactly what it is. It's exactly what it is. It is not random, and it's not arbitrary. It is from a spiritual perspective, it's a part of us. It's part of what we are as a spiritual / energy being within the human form.
Did you know that this podcast was inspired by my book, The Enchanted Earth? I will put a link below in the show notes so you can get your own copy. Right. So for somebody coming to dowsing just as a beginner, this information of sacred symbols is a little bit deeper for them. And that's wonderful. But what could somebody do that is just really new and just trying to connect to their home or to the land that they're on?
Well, I think the fundamental thing is the process that I described earlier on, which I then went very deep with. But the fact is that as soon as you start to pick up a dowsing rod or a pendulum and look for that earth energy power center, as a complete novice dowser, I would suggest that maybe you've done a little bit of practice before you do this, because you're going to get a little bit confused by what it is that you're finding. But if you've done, like, a little bit of dowsing and you think, well, okay, my results are interesting, but what's all this earth energy stuff? The thing is, just have fun with it, because for the novice dowser, it really is just a process of exploring this whole field. It's a huge amount of fun. I mean, the book, what I outline in the book is a very practical, step-by-step sort of process that somebody can follow, from complete novice through to a more advanced way of seeing the world. And that is reflecting my journey, because everything I talk about on my YouTube channel is, well, most of it, I mean, it's not everything, I haven't experienced absolutely everything, but most of it is based on my experience of what I have encountered in life through the practice of a very simple spiritual belief and an exploration of earth energy. So it's my interpretation of what we can experience. And when my wife and I, we both used to douse the earth energy center in our old house where we used to live. And when we were doing that, it was absolutely fascinating and a lot of fun, a huge amount of fun, because there are also, if you wish to open yourself to personalities and guardian type energies, then they are tremendous aspects of creation to be having conversations with. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and I love how you talk about dowsing as a one means of self-discovery. And, by working with these sacred symbols. So can you share an experience perhaps, or a story about how when somebody taps into one of these secret symbols, how that can help them with their self-discovery?
Yeah, I think one of the things to make clear is that the sacred symbols aspect that we've talked about, finding the five-pointed star or the infinity symbol, that sort of thing, and there are other things to find too. That's just one aspect of it. And that is very directly that communication with Mother Earth. And there's a whole, what would be wonderful about having the book, and if we get enough readers reading it, then what would be great would be to actually share what is it that people are finding, and what are the symbols, those symbols at that level of vibration. What are they doing as we change as a species? What are those symbols doing? What is Mother Earth directly trying to tell us? So that's only one part of the journey. That's only one part of the discovery and the path that we can take, and that I outline in the book. So I think the point is that really the book is about this fundamental shift of perception. So it's about moving from a very mainstream, as was, belief system that says, well, the material world is all there is, and there might be some kind of ghost activity somewhere every now and again, but or spirit activity or something spiritual at some level, but we never really know about it. So it's all from that perspective, and moving really into understanding, and I will answer your question in a second, but really moving into understanding that actually our role here, it's a bit deep again, but our role here is to allow the expression of the conscious cosmos through us, so that we live that presence. Okay. And that doesn't mean to say that we're all holy and all the rest of it. And, we're sitting around meditating all day, or we're, enjoying some kind of blissful experience every minute of the day, because we're incarnate as human beings. And so our humanness is really important to balance the spiritual energy. And in fact, as you will have talked about many times, I expect, the importance of being grounded, which means we're actually recognizing our humanness, the physicality, what we are, and being deeply in that, enabling us to then explore the spiritual aspect, the spiritual energy. You can't just go off and be in this airy fairy fluffiness because you can't get anything done. Anyway, don't get me on my hobby horse. So when we start to explore this perception, the differences, what we're doing, just briefly going a little bit deep and then I'll come back out again. What we're actually doing is we're exploring and pushing the boundaries on what is possible to experience. Okay, so as we work with the quantum field, the subatomic field of energy is infinite possibility. And that means fundamentally that in theory, we could, as a manifesting being, given a fair amount of free rein, because we manifest in association with higher frequencies as well, we could, in theory, manifest absolutely anything. And that is one key to healing as well, but we'll come back around to this perhaps. But the point is that what we're actually doing as we live, whether we're aware of it or not, part of our energy field is connected into the quantum field. So the quantum field of creation, which is what it is. Quantum field of infinite possibility is the field from which reality is created every moment for each individual person. Now, as we connect with that, whether we do it knowingly or not, we are experiencing that process. It's being created around us. As we interact with that creative field, that field of creation, because that's what the quantum foam is. It's a field of creation. Everything that is in the material world is created from it. As we interact with that, we are creating our lived experience. Now, what we're doing is we're expanding the possibilities that are available to us, because in the quantum realm, although it's not really, this is not scientific, all right? It's just, this is the way that I explain it, is that in the quantum realm, you've got, time doesn't really exist, but we have to express things in linear time to actually understand a process. But the quantum realm is all about energy of possibility. The quantum realm is not matter. It's not things. It's just energy of possibility. And so in that field, as we're interacting with it every moment, every nanosecond, less than that, it's instantaneous interaction. What's happening is actually the possibilities that are in the moment, they are infinite. They get narrowed down to what's probable, because there's more or less, it's like you and I having this conversation. So we're probably going to be carrying on this conversation because the chances are that's what's the best thing for this energy to experience. So if we go from possibility, anything could happen. We could have an alien turn up behind us or whatever, a spaceship, shop, anything could happen, to the probability, actually it's just going to carry on as it is, to the actualized experience. And that's what we experience as in the conscious self, the actualized experience. So it's possibility, probability, actualized. Now, as you open up the possibilities, and it starts even as you douse the Earth Energy Power Center, you're starting to expand your possibilities in the quantum realm. What might be present? Okay? Mm-hmm. So as you learn more about that and you become more mindful about it and you start to interact with it, it's what we traditionally recognize in self-development and spiritual development as, being more aware and being in the flow. Okay? Mm-hmm. So everybody's familiar with that term. So you start to do things like, they have the whole parking fairy and all this sort of thing. You sort of ask for a parking space and, oh, yeah, there it is, and all that. And you get the signs. Oh, I asked for a sign, please. And oh, there it is. That's great. That's a sign. So you get all of those things. Move beyond that. You get other wow sort of experiences, which go, oh, wow. Oh, okay. Which are really there in those early stages to just confirm, to realign yourself that actually, oh, yeah, there is something in this. Let's keep going along this way. Because otherwise we would all just kind of like, yeah, whatever, and go back to our old habits.
Yeah.
So, mm-hmm. So one of the things that you start to do is to change your attitude towards process through life. And on a daily basis, it could be, things are going to crop up and you feel in the flow, or you think, right, actually now is the time I'm going to go up to the village to buy a loaf of bread. And on the way, you bump into somebody who actually, you've never met before in your life, but you start a conversation and you realize that actually they need to talk to you because they are about to make a big life decision. And what you say will affect that life decision. And then you move on. You never see them again in your life. But you know that there was a reason for being there and for being prompted to leave the house at this point in time. So you start to live your life a little bit more like that. And then, the story has taken a long time to get to this. You asked me for a story. So the story that I would want to share is when I was making the very first video that I made with Hamish Miller. Okay, so the very first video I made with Hamish Miller back in 2003. And I was going through that sort of phase of understanding that, okay, well, life is a lot more malleable than I thought it was. I was in the planning stages of making this video. And I decided that I needed to go back down to Cornwall, where we were going to film, which was about 200 miles from where I lived. And I was going to take a cameraman with me. And I wanted to meet some people that I could talk to for their comments to be included in the video program that I was going to make. But most importantly, I wanted to talk to the owner of the field that we had chosen to film in, which is where where the Merry Maidens, it's a Neolithic sacred site. So this field where the Merry Maidens were located. So we decided that's where we were going to film, but we didn't know who owned the field. So how was I going to find out pre-internet? How was I going to find out who owned that field? I decided if I went down to Cornwall, spent hours in the car with a cameraman with me, I would meet the farmer. That's what I decided. I decided that's what'll happen, because the universe could do that. That's what'll happen. And I'll meet the people that I need to meet to be chatting to in the video, in the film. So we did. We embarked, and I had no doubt whatsoever that I was going to meet both of those sets of people. The first thing that happened when we got there was that there was a group of people in the stones, and they were actually fiddling with dowsing rods and dowsing and round the stones and all this sort of stuff. And it turned out to be the local ghost hunting group. They were out for a weekend visit, and they were all these ghost hunters there in doing all this dowsing. And I thought, well, that's great. Let's tick number one box, because I got chatting to the guy that was in charge of the group, and he said, "Oh yeah, we'd love to come and have a chat on you about ghosts and all this sort of stuff on camera." So they were happy to do that at a later stage. So it's box number one ticked. And then everything went quiet, and the field emptied, and it was a lovely sunny day, and my cameraman was fiddling around doing stuff that he needed to do while he was there to check out for pre-filming stuff. And I decided, well, I'll just ask upstairs, is there a stone that I should sit next to? Because that's what I used to do at the time, just ask to be guided to, where do you want me to sit in this circle? Which stone is right for me now? So I pointed to a stone, and I went over and sat next to it and leant against it with my back. And the stones, the Merry Maiden stones, were absolutely lovely. They're brilliant. I've had, at that time I'd had several conversations with them already with dowsing, just talking to the spirit of the stones. So I was sitting there just enjoying the sunshine and all the rest of it. And my cameraman was over in the other part of the corner, and I was just kind of resting and relaxing into it. And I opened my eyes. No, in fact, I remember exactly what it was, and it's described in the book. I was asked by the guardian of the site, "Is there anything else you need?" And I said, "Yes, I could do with meeting the farmer." And at that point, right, I looked to my left, and it was like I looked at the first stone and sort of saw it. I believe I saw it shift back by about a foot. Looked to the next stone, same thing, and the next one, same thing. I thought, that's really weird. And then I looked downhill, because the fields are sloped, down to the gate, and a Land Rover pulled up, and an old guy got out, and I said to my cameraman, hang on, I need to go and talk to that guy. He's the farmer. And I ran down the field, because he clearly wasn't going to stay there long, and it was the farmer. So the universe had gone, okay, that's what we need to do. We just shift these things around a bit, and you're in the timeline where you meet the farmer. And that was that. And that's the sort of thing that can happen, which was quite astonishing.
What a story. Yes, I remember reading that, and that was very early in your journey.
It was.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
And so actually what happens is that what happened for me, and I have seen it as I work with people, one-to-one in mentoring capacity and all this sort of thing, I have seen it repeated in other people's lives where because I would describe that as a wow experience.
Yeah.
It was like, oh yeah, okay, that's that. Wow, amazing. And it tends to happen fairly early on in the experience of shift, of change. And then it can all settle down. And it depends where you want to take your path. Do you want to get into kind of mediumship or talking to your guides very clearly and all of that sort of thing? Or do you want to get into healing or whatever it is? So things change. But that wow period, and it can go on for, it can go on for ages. But but it's not necessarily, the wows aren't necessarily going to be there all the time. And really what you end up with is a process of integration, which is what we were talking about before, where you've got the human self integrating with the spiritual self. Because at that time, if you'd been talking to me back then when that sort of experience was happening, those wow experiences were happening, I would have been less grounded. There was quite often times when I was completely off with the fairies, and it because it was so amazing. And that in itself can be a bit dodgy, a bit dangerous, but you have to integrate. So the wow experiences are not the target. They are a part of the process, part of the path. And then you integrate your knowledge and your wisdom that you accumulate anyway. Everybody does. This is not special to me or to you or to anybody. It's just, this is the process. That knowledge is integrated. And the experience that you then have, which is integrating those two aspects of self, reveals the full picture, and you live to that full picture as best you can, because that's when you start to actually experience and allow the conscious cosmos to be present with you. That's a deep response, but that is what happens.
It's so true, because it's those experiences give you that confidence,
Validation.
that this is real.
Yeah,
this is absolutely real, and I am interacting with this. And if you decide at that point that, oh, I made that up, oh, that was just a coincidence, you're going to be just kind of like reverted back a bit, right?
Yeah, or because it varies, or they just keep coming until you start to go, oh, okay, I get it. You're really making a point now. I get it, right? Because sometimes that journey is what the person has 100% signed up to. So before you incarnated in this form. So the higher energies, the higher frequencies, what I used to refer to as the management, and I think I sometimes still do in the book, I think. But the higher frequencies, the higher beings they are in control of our reality to a large extent, and they do insist on just he didn't get it that time. Let's try again. Let's try this one. Right?
That's true. That's absolutely true. I love that. And I love how you were talking about humanity as kind of being that conduit from the higher energies into the earth, and from the earth up to the higher energies. We're this channel that in feng shui we talk about heaven, humanity, and earth as the cosmic trinity. And I just love that notion.
Yeah.
And actually I had an experience while I was writing this book, The Enchanted Earth, where I had a dialogue with a tree, a beautiful old oak. And the oak was basically sharing with me that we are not necessary for Gaia to live. Gaia will go on. However, Gaia and the spirits of the earth will feel very sad if we're not there, because we are part of the family. We are part of this connection.
Yes, exactly.
It's not like we're randomly here.
No, we're not. We're not randomly here. As far as I'm concerned, the conscious cosmos includes all beings in all spaces, in all times. It's every opportunity, every possibility. That's the massiveness that is everything. You can't even comprehend anything like it, right? Now, the human aspect of all of that is one where there are other beings. Clearly, there are other beings, or we've got other animals, but there are other sentient beings in different frequencies and vibrations that are simply not in the physical, but we are still an integral part of the flow of energy and the transmission of energy through that whole channel that is part of the conscious cosmos. A channel's not a good word, but in that whole, think of it like a tube. If we're all, as a species, we're somewhere in that tube, and it's all about energy processing going through that tube. And so at the human level, we are absolutely significant. for the whole of that tube. You know, it's like if we weren't there, the conscious cosmos would have to create something else to fill that point in the tube, in the flow. And when we're talking about humanity, as far as I'm concerned, we're talking about the eternal being, the fact that we do continue to we reincarnate as another energy being or whatever. But the energy that makes us is integral to that flow. And absolutely in comparison, absolutely in sync with your tree experience. When I was doing when I was learning to do mediumship and was working very, very closely with a strong, powerful guide that was present, who we might talk about in a minute, but I was told by him that the world is here because we are, right? So the world is here because we are. So the world is is an integral part of us. And in that sense, as your tree said, if we weren't here, yes, okay, well, the world would still be here, but somebody else, something else would have to take humanity's place in order to sustain that energy flow. But I think it's an interesting concept, the fact that, the world is here because we are. So in other words, our consciousness, it's not the human species, it's the spiritual potential that we have, which is here. This is why we refer to it as a kindergarten or something like that, because we're here to learn. And that's what we do. We transform energy, we change energy all the time.
This work, I'm absolutely fascinated, constantly learning, constantly absorbing information. And, working with Earth energy is just a gift.
It's glorious. Yeah, it's glorious.
It really is a gift. Before you go into your story about one of your stories with your guide, I'd like to just ask you about negative energy, because you brought this up in the book too. And I was like, yes, this makes so much, this is how I view it as well. You said that Earth energy can adversely impact us. We've been talking up until now about energy that's beneficial and auspicious and helping and supportive, but it can inversely or adversely impact us, but doing so at the process of being part of a healing process. Can you just share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point, because when I'm working with people with doing the house healing work, I don't regard the house and the person as separate. So in other words, I don't regard the energies of the house as being separate to the energies of the person. And I tend to look at it on a multi-layered approach, in that what the person is doing is bringing the concept, they're bringing their awareness into the earth energy situation, right? So what I mean by that is, earth energy itself is neither good nor bad, right? The concept of good and the concept of bad is a human perception. So, excuse me, for a detrimental energy flow to be present means that a person has to be detrimentally affected by it. So in other words, their perception of the earth energy flow is detrimental. They think, oh God, there's this bloody thing. I can't sleep because of this bloody line. Or if they're not aware of it, I just can't sleep. What's the matter with me? What is wrong? There must be something wrong. And they'll be shifting the bed around and all this sort of stuff, changing the layout of the room. And all of that can help, of course it can. But the point is that the human's perception is an interaction with the flow of the energy. So earth energy itself is not good, not bad. But the impact of the earth energy can be detrimental. And it was proven, more or less proven, in Germany some decades ago, that crossing water lines, for example, if the person is out of sync with those crossing water lines and they're sleeping at that point, it did appear to manifest in cancer, in a serious illness in that person. Now, you've got to relate all of this back to what we were talking about the fact that everything is energy and we are energy beings fundamentally, and then we're experiencing the physicality. And of course, our reality is experienced through our subconscious and our conscious minds. So this is not to say that when somebody is suffering from detrimental earth energy flows, it's all in their head. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there is an integral role that the human being has in that circumstance. And so that's what when we're doing the house healing, that's what we address, that's what we look at, and that's what we're introducing the higher frequencies in to actually help adjust. So in that sense, it can be considered as like reality engineering on behalf of somebody else. But yeah, we need to be aware. It's like walking down the high street. If you spoke to everybody that you met when you walked down the high street or you went to the shopping mall, you're going to find some people that you like, and there are going to be some people that you really don't like and you don't get on with. And there'll be one person that nicks your wallet. It's like, okay. So one of those people is the detrimental person, but it's life. There is what we regard as good and bad in all circumstances. Even in a lovely experience like talking with you now, there's also the detrimental aspect of it, which is that I find this sort of thing quite stressful. So my body is on a high alert, kind of like, oh, hello. So, so we could look at that as a detrimental aspect, but the positive aspect, sharing this and having this conversation, helping others through this conversation, it completely outweighs the detrimental aspect. And if we look at that in terms of earth energy, somebody can sleep in a room. You can have two people sleeping in the same room being affected by the same energy lines. One of them is going to be not very well, and the other person is going to be absolutely fine, because there are other things in their experience of reality that counteract all of that other stuff from the earth energy.
Yes, totally agree. Yeah, it's fascinating working with clients and their spaces, and it very much mirrors, I feel like, feng shui, the practice of feng shui. There's a great overlap between them, and I guess that's why I was introduced to feng shui first and then dowsing and earth energy healing. But what was I just going to say? Oh, in feng shui we talk about the house is a mirror of the self.
Yes.
So we can look at the energies of the land, of the home, and it helps kind of reveal to the client like deeper layers, perhaps, of what's going on in their lives. And it really is a catalyst for change.
Yeah.
If they're open to it.
Yes. Yes, if they're open to it. But sometimes so as you'll know, sometimes for a person to be affected, they don't need to necessarily be consciously aware or open to it.
Right.
This is an interesting thing, actually. You may or may not want to include this. It's entirely up to you. The energy, the process that we're working with here, the energy that we're working with, in other words, the creative forces or that enable humanity to live as human beings, it's universal, and there are different ways of interacting with that creative energy. Now, I've had a conversation recently with the president of the International Remote Viewers Association based in America, a lovely guy. And the process of remote viewing is very similar to the dowsing process that we do, except remote viewing is really well known for having a very strict protocol that you follow. But the amazing thing about remote viewing is that they have no idea what the target is. Whereas we as house healers are targeting a specific house, and we've usually spoken to the person. So we've got an energy feeling. We know who we're dealing with. We know what the property's like. Remote viewers don't do any of that, but they can still gather information about this target in a very similar way to the way that we do, or a very similar way to the way that a feng shui practitioner would gather information about the flow of energy around a property. It's that intuitive connection that we talked about earlier on. Is really into the quantum realm. Now, so you've got remote viewing. That's one aspect. Seems completely different to what we do, but it's not. And then you've got things like magic, the practice of magic, which is very disciplined in its own sense. and very rigid in protocols that you follow. And then there are other ways of interacting with this energy. And I mean, you know, all spiritual practices throughout the world have very different protocols, but they're all doing exactly the same thing. They're all interacting with the creative forces. So the bottom line is, is a person interacting with it for good in that moral judgment, or less good in that moral judgment? A less good interaction with it would be for more selfish or self-orientated gain. And this is really where we are now. Okay, I'm going deep again. Stop me if you wish. But this is really where we are now as a species, is we've been given the groundwork. You know, everybody's, as I said earlier on, is now far more familiar with the idea that we might create our own reality and we might influence it and all the rest of it, right? That's fine. So we've been led that way. The higher energies have taken the species in that direction for a reason. And where we are now is actually we're being asked to really live it and to understand and to ask the question of ourselves, what do we want? Because what we want is what we will get, right? And so it's far better to live in a conscious, intentional way that says, okay, actually, I'm working with you guys because I know you're there, even though I can't feel you terribly well all the time or whatever, you know, but we know you're there and you've taken me on this path to this stage. And so we're going to ask you the question. So like, what do you think about this? And they'll give some kind of input, because you could use dowsing to ask this sort of question at that stage when you've got a bit more experience. And you'll get a response. Quite often they'll go through a phase of saying, well, it's up to you. What do you think? And he's like, but that's not helpful. I'm asking you. It's up to you. What do you think? Well, and there's this whole process that you go through. But there is underlying that, there is a support and a knowing that you are being supported and that life is there for a reason. So as a species, we are being asked to make that choice. Individually, we are being asked, what do you want? And how intentionally are you going to create it? And to ignore the mainstream process, the mainstream traditional attitude, which has been fundamentally built on materialism. And we are being asked to explore the non-material perspective, which is what we're talking about now. And this whole conversation is the non-material perspective, and is what I talk about in the book. But if with the non-material perspective, we're utilizing our power individually, and we then join in collectively to the reality that we want to experience and we want to live in. That's not to say that there aren't, at this time, significant issues to be dealt with in terms of the reality that we're all experiencing.
Wow. That sounds like a beautiful end to our conversation. So, Tim, you have some training that's coming up. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure when this will go out, but in April 2026, I will be starting another house healer training group. And I tend to do these. It's more like group coaching, because it's not like me standing there and giving a monologue and running PowerPoint. It is about the groups, the small groups, probably about 6 people or so in each group. It's about them coming together, and I facilitate their progress and their growth using the house healing process as the framework in which to grow and expand and understand self and understand far more about the subtle energies. And what happens at the end, it's a 10-month course. What happens at the end of the 10 months is that they can, if they wish to, they are experienced enough to be able to set up as a professional house healer. So you've learned all the responsibilities and all the protocols and all the rest of that. So you can set up as a house healer. It's a fascinating way to earn a living. And the other thing that I will be doing is, obviously the book is out and available. And what I'm aiming to do, as we get more people interested in it, I will be setting up little groups, maybe 3 or 4 people, and taking them through the process. So we will be reading the book, doing the exercises, because there are exercises, as you know, at the end of every chapter, and they build one on the other, and sometimes it's a lot easier to get on that path if you're doing it as a group and a structure. So that would probably be every 3 weeks we would meet and get together, and we would build on exactly the same format, which is like group coaching. So all I'm doing, in all of this stuff, I'm very uncomfortable about sounding like a teacher, or sounding like it's like, yes, I've done all this, I know all about this. It's like, it's not about that. It's about me just sharing what I have learned, and I learn a hell, like you do. I learn a hell of a lot from my students all the time.
That is what we have to, that is I think the true gift of leading, say, or teaching, leading a group, is that it's a mutually beneficial experience, and it's just fabulous. And I suggest any listener to sign up for your newsletter so they can get information. Go to your website. All the links are going to be below. And I have to say, if you don't already follow Tim's YouTube channel, Night's Rose, he has a highly successful, I have to say, dowsing is a very niche topic. He's got over 18,000 followers, so he's doing something right there. Absolutely. So follow his YouTube channel. And thank you so much for coming on yet again, Tim. It was such a pleasure. And I look forward to our next talk.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me, Maureen. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for being a part of the Enchanted Earth podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so that you'll know when we publish another inspiring episode. Check out my book, The Enchanted Earth, available wherever online books are sold. Thank you and have a magical day.